Have you ever watched a commander walk into a room without saying a word, and yet somehow everyone falls silent? There's a weight to his presence, a quiet gravity, not because he's loud or aggressive or dressed to impress, but because his words, when he chooses to speak, carry intention. That's the mark of a Stoic. In a world that confuses volume with value, many chase respect by talking more, explaining more, trying harder. But the Stoics knew better. Real influence doesn't come from how much you say. It comes from the space you create between your words, from clarity, stillness, and presence. They didn't aim to impress. They aimed to express, briefly, truthfully, and without need for approval. In this video, we'll explore how to speak like a Stoic. Not to dominate a conversation, but to command respect through restraint, through tone, through silence, and through the unshakable confidence of a person who no longer needs validation to feel whole. If you've ever felt overlooked, interrupted, or underestimated, this is for you. Stay with me. 1. Eliminate the "I'm sorry" habit. There's a quiet way we teach the world how to treat us, not through grand gestures, but through the subtle cues in our speech, especially the ones we don't even notice. One of the most common and most corrosive habits: over-apologizing. Every time you say "I'm sorry" for something that doesn't warrant an apology, you send a message, not just to others, but to yourself. A message that says, "I am at fault, I am in the way, I am less." Over time, this becomes a posture, a way of shrinking yourself to make others more comfortable. But why should presence feel like an offense? There's a woman I knew, Emma, bright, capable, thoughtful, but she apologized constantly. "Sorry. Could I ask a quick question?" "Sorry. Just wondering if you got my email." "Sorry, I can't make it this weekend." Her voice was soft, her shoulders always slightly hunched. She never meant to seem unsure, but her words taught people not to take her seriously. One day, during a project meeting, a junior colleague interrupted her twice. Instead of holding her ground, Emma smiled nervously and said, "Sorry, go ahead." I saw the shift. The room no longer saw her as the lead. Her own apology had quietly handed away authority. And that moment it changed something in her. She didn't get angry. She got curious. She started noticing how often she apologized, and for what. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment of it." Emma realized the discomfort didn't come from others. It came from how she judged herself, from the belief that taking up space, having a voice, asking a question needed to be excused. From that day on, she made a simple vow: no more apologies unless they were truly necessary. And that shift, it was subtle but powerful. When she was late, she said, "Thank you for your patience." When she needed something, she asked directly. When she had to decline, she said, "I won't be able to join, but I appreciate the invite." No guilt, no shrinking, just clarity. This isn't about being cold or rude. It's about respect, starting with yourself. Because every unnecessary apology is a quiet act of self-doubt. And when you project doubt, people respond with hesitation, not confidence. And the danger runs deeper than just perception. When you always frame your words with "sorry," you start being seen as someone who takes the blame. People begin handing you things they wouldn't dare assign to someone more assertive. You become the default yes person, the silent fixer, the easy target for last-minute favors and emotional guilt trips. Let's say a colleague asks you to handle something they forgot again. Your instinct might be to say, "Sorry, I'll try to make time." But what if you said, "That won't work with my current schedule. Can we reassign it?" The tone changes. And so does the power dynamic. In friendships too, you don't need to apologize for having boundaries, needs, or limited time. Saying, "I won't make it tonight, but I hope you enjoy," is not cold. It's honest. It respects both your time and theirs. Of course, real apologies matter. When you've wronged someone, own it fully. But don't dilute that strength by scattering apologies like confetti in every interaction. If you want to unlearn this habit, start with awareness. Catch yourself before the words leave your mouth. Replace sorry with intention. "Do you have a moment?" is not less kind than "sorry to bother you." It's simply more confident. Because in the end, the way you speak becomes the way you live. And when you stop apologizing for who you are, the world starts paying attention to what you say. Let's keep going. The next principle is just as vital: learning to set and protect your boundaries. 2. Set boundaries and stick to them. Seneca once said, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." In other words, we often give our time and energy away, as if we'll never run out of it. But the truth is, your life is shaped not just by what you allow, but by what you refuse to tolerate. That's where boundaries come in. Boundaries aren't walls to push people away. They are gates to protect what matters. And if you don't build them with clarity, others will treat your time, your energy, and your dignity like they're up for grabs. Let me tell you about Daniel, a colleague I once worked with. Reliable, empathetic, always willing to help. But there was a pattern. People constantly dumped last-minute tasks on him, knowing he'd say yes. One Friday, after a particularly long week, someone asked him to quickly rework a full proposal before Monday. He had family plans. He had already done his share, but he said yes. By Monday, he looked drained, not because of the task, but because he knew he'd betrayed himself. He wasn't angry at them. He was disappointed in himself for not drawing the line. That's the quiet cost of saying yes when you mean no. It chips away at your peace, slowly, silently, and repeatedly. And the Stoics understood this deeply. You cannot claim to value your life if you let others write your schedule. You cannot cultivate discipline while giving your time to every request out of guilt or fear of being misunderstood. Setting boundaries isn't harsh. It's an act of responsibility. The discomfort you feel when you say no is temporary. The resentment you feel when you say yes to what drains you, that lingers. Here's something practical. Before you say yes to anything, ask yourself, if I had to do this today, with the energy I have right now, would I still agree? If the answer is no, then your real answer is no. You don't need to justify everything. "I'm not available for that" is enough. "That won't work for me" is enough. Clarity is powerful, and people who thrive on your compliance will test your boundaries the moment you build them. Let them. Because the ones who respect your no are the ones worth your yes. When you draw a line, you teach others how to treat you. But more importantly, you teach yourself what you're willing to stand for. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That includes protecting your peace, your energy, and your purpose. And don't worry if you feel guilty at first. That guilt is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're breaking an old habit, one that served others at your expense. Start small. Decline an invite you don't feel excited about. Let a text wait until tomorrow. Say no without the long excuse. Each moment you choose yourself is a vote for the life you want to live. And here's what you'll find. The more you enforce your boundaries, the less you'll need to. The message will speak for itself. You become someone who is calm, clear, and not easily moved. You don't owe the world your constant availability. You owe yourself a life you don't resent. And now that your space is protected, let's talk about how to strengthen your voice within it by mastering the pause. 3. Master the art of pausing. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Yet in today's world, it feels like everyone is racing to speak first, speak fast, speak more. But wisdom doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it waits. And the ones who command the most respect, they don't just speak, they pause. They understand that silence is not the absence of thought, it is the space where thought becomes meaningful. There was a man I once knew, Thomas, a retired military officer turned teacher. Quiet, measured, deliberate. In every faculty meeting, while others jumped in with suggestions or critiques, he remained silent. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he was listening, thinking. When he did speak, it was never more than a few sentences. But when he finished, the room was silent. Not out of obligation, out of respect. What made his words powerful wasn't complexity, it was timing. He mastered the pause, not as a dramatic tool, but as a sign of inner calm. He let his words breathe. And that's something we often forget. In a culture of instant replies and endless chatter, silence feels like weakness. People rush to respond, afraid they'll seem slow or uncertain. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. The wise don't fear silence, they wield it. Think of it like music. A song with no pauses is just noise. The beauty is in the spaces between the notes. The same is true for speech. Let's say you're sharing an idea during a meeting. You rattle it off quickly, eager to prove yourself. You reach the end and realize no one looks moved. Now imagine you take a different approach. You make your first point. You stop. You let it sit. People shift in their chairs. They're thinking. That's the power of a pause. You haven't lost the room, you've pulled them in. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let your words be few and well chosen." That's not about being passive. It's about precision. When you pause, you show that you don't need to chase attention because your words carry weight. I had to learn this myself. Years ago, during a tense discussion with a client, I rushed to explain our strategy, filling every second with justification. I thought I was being thorough, but afterward, my mentor said, "You didn't let them think. You were answering questions they hadn't even asked." That changed everything. The next time I slowed down, I made my case and waited. That silence, though brief, shifted the tone of the room. I wasn't just delivering information, I was commanding attention. People took notes, they asked better questions, because they had time to absorb. This doesn't just apply to presentations, it works in conflict too. When someone is upset, our instinct is to defend ourselves immediately. But when you pause instead of reacting, you send a different message. I'm in control. I choose my response. And that control earns quiet respect, especially in high-stress situations. Even in everyday life, this principle changes everything. Pause before replying to a question. Pause before sharing your opinion. Not to delay, but to lead. Your pause becomes the moment others recognize your presence. Here's a challenge for you. Over the next 24 hours, in every conversation, practice intentional pauses. After a key point, stop. Let your words land. At first, it might feel awkward, but soon you'll notice people won't interrupt. They'll wait. And that wait, that's power. Because the ability to pause is not hesitation, it is command. And in a noisy world, the person who speaks like still water will always be heard. Next, we'll explore how to use humor wisely without ever trading away your presence. 4. Use humor without becoming a clown. Epictetus once said, "Don't provoke laughter, for the habit is apt to slide into vulgarity and quickly draws contempt." In other words, while humor has its place, when overused or misused, it begins to erode not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. The truth is, humor is a form of power. It can disarm tension, build rapport, and make difficult truths more digestible. But like any power, if left unchecked, it can become a liability. There's a man I once worked with, Leo. Brilliant mind, quick wit. In every meeting, he had the room laughing within minutes. People liked him. He was charming, always had a clever remark. But when it came time for serious decisions or promotions, Leo was always passed over. One day, I asked a colleague why. The response was quiet, but revealing. Leo's funny, but no one trusts him to lead. That hit me. Leo's jokes had become his armor. They entertained, but they also shielded him from vulnerability, from seriousness, from stepping into authority. And over time, they turned his presence into background noise, amusing but forgettable. Seneca wrote, "Let your laughter be genuine and your joy disciplined." Stoicism doesn't reject humor, it calls for wisdom in its use. The goal isn't to become stoic-faced and humorless. It's to ensure your laughter doesn't come at the expense of your voice. So how do you walk that line? Start by knowing your intention. Humor is at its best when it serves the moment, not when it steals it. If you're lightening the mood during a tense discussion, great. If you're making a complex idea easier to grasp, even better. But if you're cracking a joke just to escape discomfort or win quick approval, pause. Ask yourself, is this helping the moment or hiding from it? Second, be mindful of the kind of humor you use. Self-deprecating humor can be powerful in small doses. It shows humility and self-awareness, but lean on it too much, and it chips away at your credibility. Instead of saying, "I'm terrible with this stuff," say, "I'm learning and getting better each time." One makes people laugh at you, the other earns quiet respect. Third, learn to read silence. Not every space needs to be filled. The person who can sit in seriousness without needing to turn it into a punchline, that person commands a different kind of attention. Humor can amplify your message, but seriousness anchors it. And let's talk about leadership. A well-timed joke can build trust. It shows you don't take yourself too seriously, but if you joke too often or at the wrong times, people may begin to question your judgment, especially in moments where clarity, direction, or conviction is needed. There's also the danger of using humor to avoid truth. We joke about stress, about being overwhelmed, about not knowing what we're doing, and sometimes it's funny. But sometimes it's a cry for help disguised in a punchline. Don't let your humor become your mask. Use humor like seasoning. A little adds flavor. Too much spoils the meal. So here's your challenge. In your next conversation, use humor once, but deliberately. Make it support your message, not distract from it. And notice how it lands. Does it make people feel lighter, or does it make you seem smaller? Because in the end, respect doesn't come from being the most entertaining person in the room. It comes from being the one who knows when to be light, when to be still, and when to be clear. Next, we'll explore another subtle form of self-sabotage, gossip, and how cutting it from your speech builds quiet, unshakable strength. 5. Drop the gossip. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." And nowhere is this more relevant than when you're tempted to speak poorly about someone behind their back. Gossip is a quiet poison. It disguises itself as harmless chatter, as venting, as concern, but in truth, it's a betrayal dressed up as bonding. It makes you feel close to someone for a moment, while slowly undermining your integrity in the eyes of everyone around you. There was a young manager named Claire I once mentored. Sharp, driven, charismatic, but she had a habit of using gossip as a way to win allies. Whenever a colleague frustrated her, she'd confide in another co-worker. "He never carries his weight," or "she's just trying to get noticed." These weren't full-blown character assassinations, just little criticisms sprinkled throughout the day. At first, people laughed along. It felt like camaraderie. But over time, the laughter grew thinner. Colleagues stopped sharing things with Claire. Invitations slowed. Promotions went elsewhere. One afternoon she asked me, "Why do I feel like no one trusts me anymore?" I didn't lecture. I just asked her a question. If they know you talk about others when they're not around, why would they believe you wouldn't do the same to them? The silence that followed was the beginning of her transformation. Here's what the Stoics understood. Words are never just words. They're reflections of character. And when you use your voice to tear others down, especially when they're not present, you reveal more about yourself than about them. Seneca once said, "What progress have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself." A true friend to yourself and others does not need to seek status by diminishing someone else. That's not strength. That's weakness disguised as wit. So how do you break the gossip habit? Start by recognizing its disguise. Gossip often arrives in soft packaging. It says, "I'm just being honest," or "It's just between us." But the test is simple. Is what I'm saying helpful, kind, and necessary? If it fails that test, it's gossip, no matter how subtle. Next, shift the current. You don't have to confront people aggressively. Just change the course. Say, "That's their business. I'd rather not speculate," or "Let's focus on something that actually helps." The tone doesn't have to be harsh. It just has to be clear. And here's the unexpected benefit. People start to see you differently. Not as someone who's cold or self-righteous, but as someone who is steady, trustworthy, above the noise. You become the one they turn to when they need clarity, not chaos. Refusing to gossip isn't about being perfect, it's about being intentional. It's about valuing your reputation more than your need to feel important for a fleeting moment. Because every time you speak ill of someone behind their back, you're also telling others how you'd treat them when they're not in the room. That memory sticks. It lingers far longer than the story you told. So the next time you're pulled into a whispered conversation, ask yourself, do I want to be respected or remembered as a source of drama? The answer will shape not just how others see you, but who you become. And now, let's talk about something even more powerful than what you say, knowing when to stop speaking altogether. 6. Know when to stop talking. Seneca once wrote, "Speech that's full of sound but void of reason is better left unspoken." In other words, restraint isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And in conversation, the ability to stop talking at the right moment is what often separates those who are merely heard from those who are truly respected. We've all met the person who doesn't know when to stop. They over-explain, they repeat themselves, they keep speaking long after the moment has passed. At first you listen out of politeness, but eventually their words lose weight, and so does their presence. I remember a team presentation where a colleague named Aaron nailed the opening, clear, concise, confident. But then he kept going, explaining the same point 3 different ways, circling back to what he'd already said. By the time he finished, the room was distracted and the impact was gone. Later, our manager said, he had them, then he talked them out of it. It stuck with me. Not because it was harsh, but because it was true. Why do we do this? Often, it's fear. We think if we stop speaking, we'll lose control of the conversation, or we'll be misunderstood. So we keep going, trying to fill every silence, cover every angle, make our case airtight. But what we don't realize is that the silence we fear is where respect often takes root. Think of great leaders, great thinkers, great speakers. They don't flood you with words. They speak, pause, and leave space for the message to settle. Their power lies in restraint. If you want to earn respect through speech, start here. First, practice brevity. Before you speak, ask yourself, what's the clearest way to say this once? Not twice, not 5 ways. Just once, with confidence. Second, honor the pause. After you make your point, don't rush to fill the silence. Let it breathe. Let your listener absorb it. Sometimes the most impactful sentence is the one followed by stillness. Third, resist the urge to explain yourself into weakness, especially in moments that matter, negotiations, interviews, disagreements. State your truth, then stop. The longer you speak, the more room you give doubt to creep in. Silence isn't awkward. It's powerful. It says, I've said what I needed to say, and I trust it's enough. And that's what Stoicism teaches us. To be deliberate, to be measured, to value clarity over volume. So the next time you're in a conversation and feel the urge to keep going, remind yourself, true strength is not found in the most words, but in the most meaningful ones. Let your words carry weight. Then let them rest. Now, let's bring it all together with one final reflection on what it truly means to command respect in a noisy world. Respect isn't demanded, it's revealed through how you speak, how you hold silence, and how you carry your presence. The Stoics taught us that true influence begins not with volume, but with discipline. When your words are few but chosen, when your humor uplifts but never undermines, when you set boundaries and stay quiet when it matters, people listen, and more importantly, they respect you. As Marcus Aurelius reminded us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Let your thoughts be calm, your speech intentional, and your silence powerful. Which habit spoke to you most today? Drop a comment below with "Command through clarity." And if this resonated, give it a like, share it with someone who's ready to speak with presence, and subscribe for more Stoic tools to live and lead with purpose. This is just the beginning. Your voice, when disciplined, becomes your power.